Welcome everyone to this video, courtesy of a returning sponsor, REC Watches. Now you've hopefully seen this picture of 61-7956 before. That's the code number for this particular aircraft, and you'll note the twin cockpit, which makes it a trainer. In fact, the only SR-71B two-seat trainer to see prolonged service. They only built two, one crashed, they had to cobble another one together out of spares. And although she no longer flies, she now resides in what I'm reliably informed is in fact Kalamazoo Aviation History Museum, not Kalamazoo. Well, there you go, you learn something new every day. There she is being transported, and there she is on display. But what's this got to do with anything, especially watches? Well, during any aircraft service career, parts wear out. And although made from titanium, as indeed a good chunk of the SR-71 is generally, these moving plates at the back of each engine, known as turkey feathers, which regulated afterburner pressure, wore out considerably faster than the aircraft did, so they had to be replaced. And that inspired the creation of the Habu series of watches, named after a pit viper which is found on Okinawa, which is where many of the SR-71s operated from during their active service careers. Each Habu watch contains a piece of that aircraft titanium, and the watch as a whole has been designed with many aesthetics taken from the SR-71. So if you want to get your hands on one, then you can follow the link in the description below. The collection is due for release next month in July, but they're available for pre-order with a pre-order discount, and if you use the code DRAC, you get a further discount on top of the pre-order discount. There are, of course, a limited number of them, because there's only so much SR-71 material around, but thanks very much to REC Watches for kindly sponsoring this video. And now, on with the main show, as it were. So last time we were out with the Hungarian Danube River Flotilla, in some of the interviews, we mentioned exercises that we'd been doing, as well as obviously telling you about the history. But outside of the brief intro, you didn't actually get to see those exercises being carried out. So today, we're going to show you the three exercises that we did. So that's a man overboard exercise, a onboard fire exercise, so essentially damage control, and then we're going to move on to an anti-air, anti-helicopter specifically exercise. So the first thing, of course, that we needed to do was to depart the home base. At the time, this was where the monitor Litha was being preserved. And she goes into dock every so often for maintenance. You can see her there in the background. You've got a little power boat there as well, just in the closer background. But then, of course, we have the ship that we're on, and its sister ship, which is what we're casting off from. The engines have just been fired up, hence the slight cloud of smoke. But as you can see from the wake there, we're beginning to move off. This is our little base. There's AM-22, the one we're leaving behind, all nice and wrapped up. And we obviously have to head out onto the Danube. Banners flying, naturally. This is, of course, a commissioned vessel, in order to reach our safe exercise area. And for those of you who live in the area around Budapest, we're heading for the part of the river that's just a little bit north of the city centre itself. And for those of you in the wider world, you may be aware that the Danube runs, generally speaking, from the northwest to the southeast. But in the area around Budapest and to the south of it, it runs pretty much north-south. So we're just north of this main city. We're going to head slightly further north, and therefore we're heading upstream. If we headed south, i.e. downstream, we'd run straight through the city, but obviously that's part of the main responsibility for the flotilla. So obviously we're now looking here southwards. You can see just the very edges of the city out there to our port side as we swing around. But as we come about towards our main exercise area, again, those of you who are local might recognize this. This is the Megyeri Bridge. I think that's how it's pronounced anyway, which supports the M0 motorway. So this little open stretch of water is where we're going to conduct the various exercises, starting with our man overboard exercise, which is quite fun, actually. Not least because they decided they were going to use a life preserver to stand in for the man overboard instead of chucking me in, which, was always a good thing, at least as far as I'm concerned. Now, we actually did this exercise twice, but we're going to show you the second time around, because the second time around our intrepid cameraman was allowed to go along with the boat. So there's the siren as the rubber ring that's taking the place of the actual man going overboard has gone overboard. And so we're preparing the ship's boat, which obviously that means this is a ship because it's carrying its own boat. And this has to go over the side. And we're slowing down at the moment because obviously in real life people are saying, hey, look, there's a guy overboard. Immediately everyone starts preparing for the exercise to recover the person, but the ship has to come to a stop as and where it's safe. The whistle there signaling that they believe the ship has slowed down enough for the boat to be safely launched, so it goes over the side. They're just going to tie it off so that the men can actually climb aboard. You can see there's a little ladder there just on our left-hand side. And part of the reason I wasn't aboard the boat was because, well, I was doing this. I was piloting a drone that was observing the whole proceeding. So since I took off and landed aboard the ship, this also is technically Hungary's first aircraft carrier. So as you can tell from the little bursts of power coming from our ship, we're just essentially station keeping against the current. We haven't actually gone that far from where the ring was thrown overboard, but you can't really see it in this shot, and that's because, of course, the river is continuing to flow south, so the river is taking our stand-in person pretty much away with it. And then it's time for the intrepid cameraman to climb aboard and see everything from close up. So if I'm getting this right, you should have a picture-in-picture now showing both the drone footage and the on-the-boat view. As you can see, we're first reversing away from the mothership. The drone will essentially keep an eye on the mothership while we keep our main view down here with the boat. So we're motoring away. At this point, the ship is just still keeping position against the current because that's quite important for positional reporting. But as you can see, the next step is for the mothership to turn. Now, this has two important functions. Firstly, the broadside of the ship obviously intercepts a little bit of the downward flow, which in theory will calm the water somewhat for the small boat, which as you can see is now heading downstream at quite a pace. But also, because of course the man who's gone overboard may be injured, this also allows the ship to be closer, which shortens the return journey, which is obviously good practice when you're recovering potentially injured people from the water. So the ship is heading downstream now behind the powerboat, or this little rubber inflatable, which is heading at a fair old clip towards, well, where we hope we're going to find the notional man overboard. You can just about see them there in the top left. The drone's managed to catch a glimpse of where it is. And there is our little ring. He's drifted a fair bit downstream. So we're just going to recover him because, of course, not a person, so we don't need to go through the whole hauling people on board, but we have hauled the ring on board, and now it's time to return. Once again, the ship is going to go broadside on to try and calm the waters a little bit. Obviously, it's a fairly calm day on the Danube in this particular exercise, but that's not necessarily always going to be the case. So this is obviously much more important going away when you're heading out to pick up the person. It's just a matter of courtesy and, giving people a smoother ride. On the way back, however, a calmer ride back is vital if the person you're recovering might have been somewhat injured. Also is a good opportunity to show off just how agile this patrol craft is. And, it's not trying especially hard, but it's showing a good degree of mobility even so. And as you can see, we're approaching the stern. We've got a good chunk of the ship's company ready to receive us. And then it's just a matter of throwing a line aboard and being hauled alongside. As you can see, the gunnels have been taken down in this area, so we've got the option to lift a stretcher on board or just go up the little ladder, and we're being tied off. And that allows us to fade back out to the full drone view. As you can see, we've gone a little bit further downstream, but now we're ready to head back upstream to carry out the second of our exercises for the day, which is going to be the what happens if something catches fire aboard the ship moment. And to simulate this exercise, as you can see, we've opened a hatch up here in the bow, and one of the crew is preparing a little smoke grenade. So this is going to simulate our fire, because of course we don't want to actually set fire to the ship. That would be more than a little bit dumb. And so with our intrepid little smoke grenade ignited, that gets chucked in. Once they've made sure it actually catches properly. Anyone who's played Airsoft will know that particular issue. And now, oh no, we're on fire. So we have to prepare to fight the potential fire. So we've got some portable fire extinguishers, we've got the ship's dedicated fire extinguishing equipment, and as you can see, they're also using a pole to open the hatch, because of course, in the event of a real fire, that hatch may be burning hot. You don't want to injure people just figuring out what's going wrong. Now, we're looking at the situation. Can we deal with it with the portable hand fire extinguisher? Of course, these things tend to be single use, so we're not actually going to spray with the handheld fire extinguisher, but we're making the actions as if we are. But it turns out, shockingly, no, this is too severe, and so the ship's main firefighting equipment with firefighting foam has to be used instead. And for those of you who've ever been in the fire services of various places, or indeed if you've been on a ship and done damage control, you'll know that these hoses can get up to a fair bit of pressure, so they're just adjusting the valves there to ensure we have a decent head of pressure built up without said pressure, whipping everybody off the bow and into the Danube, which again would be somewhat unproductive. You'll notice we've got a big nozzle up there in the front of the hose. That's to help aerosolize the foam and provide plenty of air throughput, because one of the key features of this foam, apart from the fact it starves the thing of oxygen, is, of course, the fact that lots and lots of bubbles, as you can see, developing rather quickly, ensure that a safe barrier is formed between the fire and the rest of the ship. But, of course, we're not actually on fire, so we don't actually want to dump a bunch of firefighting chemical foam into an otherwise perfectly fine bit of the ship. So there's a little bit of a splash because of the wind and so forth, but what we're actually doing in this case is we're saturating the deck and everything's just washing off. So that's fine. As you can see, the smoke from the smoke grenade is happily billowing a little bit out of the hatch. So we're now bringing the damage or the fire back under control. And it's now been judged that the fire is safely under control. Of course, that means the hatch has been cooled down, so we can unhook the hatch, close it up, and turn off the pumps, so we don't have to worry about the hose anymore. And then, of course, it's also important to pack away all the damage control equipment so that it's ready for use if anything actually happens. I mean, you have to use it for real. So it's a relatively low-key demonstration, but it shows you how quickly everything can be done. And then, of course, well, the deck's covered in firefighting foam. Don't worry, it's not poisonous, but it is slippery. So we do have to now clean the deck, so we don't end up doing man overboard for real. And then we have our anti-aircraft drill. Now, this is interesting on two separate accounts, partly modern, partly historical. From a modern perspective, obviously, it shows how drilled and disciplined the crew of the ship is. But also from a historical perspective, well, we're sticking 20mm drum magazines onto a bunch of 20mm cannon before it goes into search mode and then finally goes after an aerial target. So it gives you some idea as well, although obviously the mount is not exactly the same as what you'd find in World War II, but some idea of what it would be like for the men manning the Oerlikon 20mm on various Allied warships in terms of when they're called to action stations. How quickly can you get ready-use ammunition into the guns and get them ready to repel an air attack? Because, of course, for many reasons, ranging from simple safety to the fact that ammunition doesn't generally like being left out in sea spray, or in this case, just freshwater spray, you don't leave the ammunition ready to use unless you're already at action stations. So let's have a look and see how this goes. You can see we've got the gunner jumping in, and we've got the two loaders preparing the ammunition feeds ready to receive the drums. There's the ready ammunition lockers just in front of the bridge there. So the first pair of drums going on, and then the second pair of drums going on, because obviously 2 sets of drums either side, 4 guns total. And now this is a manually operated mount, so you can see the operator cranking so that he can control elevation and traverse, searching the skies for something. He has been told there is a helicopter in the area. And now it's time to open fire. And then, of course, the gun can return to its ready position, and the 2 loaders obviously cranking everything to make sure it's safe. and then retrieve the 4 ammunition cases. We obviously didn't use all of the ammunition, but this is an exercise. And that shows you just how quickly you can go from completely unloaded to loaded, aim, fire, and unloaded again. And now the operator is just checking the traverse and elevation are still working fine without anything loaded. Yep, it's fine. So leaving it in a rest position, and the ammo cases can be returned to their ready use lockers. But as with pretty much all the exercises, we did this more than once. So let's have less of me talking and run through that exercise again, full volume. That sounds like fun.
Figyelem, légiriadó, légiriadó, légiriadó. Önálló légtérfigyelés. Cél a támadó helikopter 1 óránál.
Cél megvan! Üzenést befejeztem!
Állj, alaphelyzet, üríts! Veszteleníts!
Vesztelenítve!
Kezelők hátra, riadó vége, riadó vége.
And so that wraps up this look at what some actual real-life shipboard exercises look like, at least on the Danube these days. So thank you once more to the men of the flotilla in general, and particularly, of course, the crew of our wonderful ship of the day. And, of course, also shout out to my friend and artist, Peter Anshan, who provided the very badly needed English to Hungarian translation services throughout the day. So I knew what was going on, and the crew knew what the strange Englishman in their midst was babbling on about most of the time. Now, of course, from a naval historian's perspective or a naval history enthusiast, if you do find yourself in Budapest, please do go and see the Leitha if you can. When she's open, she's moored just below the Hungarian Parliament building in pretty much dead center of the city. And, of course, although you probably aren't going to be able to get a ride aboard the flotilla, if you do happen to see one of the flotilla boats meandering past on the Danube, do give them a wave. Because whether it's fishing out unexploded bombs, providing general security, rescuing people in distress who've managed to get into the river in some way, shape, or form that isn't conducive to their health, training exercises, or the preservation of history, the flotilla continues to do very, very important work on the Danube in and around the area of Budapest, maintaining the history that we talked about in the previous video of all the various predecessor formations. So, hope you've enjoyed this video, and I hope to see you again in another one at some point in the future, hopefully soon.